Hey, major innovators, school leaders, people with big dreams and big vision of what school could be rather than what school is. Welcome back. We talked a bit about the shift in how learning can look, how meaningful it can look when we change it from being just based around disconnected subjects and content and to what it could look like when we put it around big kind of learning, a big question, a big problem, and really how we can connect those subjects. Now, if we do that, really to truly honor that way of learning, we have to look a little bit about how we report, because typically we have students working mainly for a grade, and we really want to get away from that, because when you go to the real world, sure, there's evaluations sometimes, but it's usually not a grade. It's really kind of how well you solve that particular problem, challenge, or project, and it's just more meaningful that way. So what would that look like in school? So I'm going to grab my markers again, and I'll try not to bust the caps off as often so that it makes too much noise. But if you look at, here's a learning journey, right? Typically, when you're working for a grade in school. And you might start out with a little short reading, perhaps. And let's just give it some context, all right? And I'm a teacher, I've taught humanities. When I first taught humanities, it was more history, and we had things divided according to units. So, perhaps the topic was ancient civilizations. So we might do a reading about some ancient civilizations. We might do a little bit of, I'm already clicking the markers again. I'll try to make this easy. We might do an activity. We might look at, okay, well, what were the core components of these, civilizations? And we might look at, some of the geography, the economy. And beyond the reading, they'll do an activity and try to determine, well, what civilization did these characteristics belong to, right? It's a short kind of fun activity, but it's not very deep. Then we might move on to a lesson, okay? So we're extending what we've learned a little bit. Now we're going into a lesson of why we remember some of these civilizations, what made them so great. And so it's kind of interesting, the topic, but again, it's not going very deep. We've got these lessons, activity, then here we might have a quiz. And then we repeat that structure again. So we've got our reading again here, and it goes on, so on and so forth. I think you get the picture. I don't have to mark out each of these triangles. And then perhaps, maybe at the end, you might do an interesting project. You might say, all right, kids, now we're going to do a project about all the stuff we learned about ancient civilizations. They do this big project here at the end. That's worth part of their grades. Typically, they might put together maybe a poster. Maybe they do a PowerPoint. And it's the fun part, right? It's like, all right, now we're going to do this fun part. But basically all they're doing is just sharing everything that they learned. They're not doing something authentic or creating something new. And then we add all that stuff together. And let's say maybe these quizzes, we give them a little bit more points. We say they're 40 points. We say the lesson is 10 points. The activity is 20. We add all these things together, and then we pump out a grade. And we divide by all the activities, and we go, okay, you got a B at the end of the report. So they get this report, it's disconnected, it doesn't share really their learning journey. It gives them this arbitrary number at the end. What does a B mean? So we try to attach some value. It means, hey, you've got most of the skills, but not all of them. A is, okay, you've definitely excelled in all of these things. You get an A for this unit. But it's not very meaningful. It didn't really go very deep. It doesn't share much of the journey. And it's certainly not motivating. How many times have we said to kids, oh, this is going to be on the test, or, this is going to count in your final grade. But really, research shows that's not that motivating. And you see schools and some kids failing, and that's not going to improve their grades, okay, or their motivation and performance. So instead of working for a grade, what would happen if we shifted school to be less about grades and we shifted school to be more about working to solve a problem? So we talked a bit about what that would look like, and we talked about the subjects and how they would attach. I'm going to give you a real problem in a real school that was attacking that problem. And that problem, specific problem, had to do with immigrant stereotypes, okay? And I'll give a bit of a background. So it was this area of Connecticut, Connecticut and the eastern seaboard of the United States. Lots of immigrants, lots of people coming from different countries, having to integrate into society, having to integrate and learn a new language. How tough is that? I've moved to China. I know how tough that is. My Mandarin isn't very good, but it can feel a bit unsettling. So you got to learn a new language, you got to get a job, you've got to integrate into society. And of course, there's a lot of stereotypes that come out of that. How people are perceived, and how much negativity sometimes is directed towards immigrants. So the problem that these kids were attacking is how do we help to reverse some of the stereotypes that we see by humanizing the immigrant story? That was the big question. That was a big problem they were solving. Now, instead of looking at like individual lessons and activities, now we start to look at these big pieces that they're going to put together. So this big piece right here, let's say piece number 1, is they're going to have to put together a journey of their story, of this immigrant story, right? So the big piece of work that they're going to have to do is that interview, okay? They're going to have to come up with the questions. They're going to have to understand interview techniques. How do we take that interview and turn it into a story? So lots of great content there. That's that big puzzle piece. That's that big summative piece that we're working towards. And now, where we said the lessons and activities that you remember from the reverse, well, all of those, we had, I don't know, it was a circle, I think a triangle. One of this was like a quiz. Okay, well then all of these pieces are related to that big piece that they're putting together, the interview, and it's solving this problem of reversing immigrant stereotypes. Well, now that they've done the interview, another thing they're going to have to do is put together a story, okay? How can they create that narrative? How can they create that story of what that immigrant's experience was like? And so the way they're doing that is they're taking all their interview information and they're creating a story. And they're learning a little bit about the hero's journey, the narrative story arc, and they're doing all of those things so that they can put that digital story together of that particular immigrant. So again, now you have the story is the second piece. But they're also putting together a bit of the photographic journey as well. So now you have the art teacher teaching them about photography. And they're having to put together a real professional exhibition to show that particular immigrant in many different lights. Obviously, there's a lot of lessons and activities associated with that. So they got the interview, they got the story, they got the photography, and now they're going to do their story through mapping. And so their other big piece is they're sharing the history of that immigrant and how they've come into the United States through detailed maps, all different maps. Topographical maps, political maps, historical maps. So now you're getting into a lot of your content as a teacher, but you're also having students work towards solving a problem, reversing immigrant stereotypes. They're doing it through these pieces. They put these puzzle pieces together, and at the very end, you have a portfolio of work. So rather than a grade, now you have a portfolio. It shares the journey. You put those pieces together. It gives a better narrative to the student, and it helps to motivate them. I hope this video has been helpful. Think about how you might put together that journey for your students.